piano had not made a sound in 4 years. It sat in the corner of the Whitmore Estate's main hall the way old things sit, when no one knows what else to do with them. Covered in a cloth that had once been white, pushed against the wall, between two tall windows that looked out over the lake. The cloth had yellowed at the edges. The legs of the bench were filmed with dust. And yet, on the night of the Whitmore Legacy Gala, someone had lit the candelabra above it, and the light caught the lacquered lid beneath the cloth and made it glow like something still alive. Evelyn Whitmore, 44, stood near the entrance to the hall in a charcoal evening gown, her hair pulled back in the way that real wealth never needs to explain. She was the kind of woman who had learned from an early age that rooms rearranged themselves around her when she walked in. This one was no different. The hall held perhaps 90 guests, collectors, patrons, the board of the Whitmore Foundation, a scattering of journalists who had been permitted in on the understanding that they would photograph the art and not the arguments. Evelyn had organized this gala herself. She did that every year. The centerpiece of the evening was not the collection of her late father's paintings. Although those hung in every room, and people were already stopping in front of them with glasses raised, it was the piano. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, had been a self-taught pianist who played every Sunday morning for 40 years, and never once performed for anyone but the family. When he died, Evelyn had the piano tuned out of habit, and then something in it broke. A mechanism, a pin, something she did not understand, and after 2 repair attempts that went nowhere, she had covered it with the cloth and left it there because she could not bring herself to remove it. Tonight, as part of the gala's programming, she had arranged for a professional restorer to assess it. The man had been recommended by the conservatory in Halifax. He was supposed to arrive at 6. At 6:45, his assistant called to say he had broken down on the highway outside Truro and would not be coming. Evelyn absorbed the information without letting it show on her face, thanked the assistant politely, and set the phone face down on the side table. Around her, the gala hummed. Waitstaff moved through the crowd with small plates. Someone laughed too loudly near the fireplace. The candelabra above the piano threw its warm and useless light. Owen Hartley, 41, had been setting up the catering stations in the back corridor since 3 in the afternoon. He was not supposed to be there. That is to say, he was not the regular staff. The agency that Evelyn's coordinator had booked had sent 3 people short, and Owen had been called in as a fill-in through a secondary agency that handled overflow. He worked maintenance and event labor out of Dartmouth. He had done this kind of work for 7 years, long enough to know which rooms to stay out of and how to carry a tray without being noticed. He was also the kind of man who was easy to overlook. Average height, broad through the shoulders in the way that comes from real work rather than a gym, wearing the white shirt and black trousers that the agency required. There was nothing about him that announced itself. He had a habit of listening more than he spoke, and of watching things with the particular attention of someone who had spent a long time learning to read a room before entering it. His daughter, Phoebe, was 7. She was waiting at his sister's apartment in Dartmouth with a coloring book and a bag of ketchup chips. She had made him promise to come back before 9 so she could show him the drawing she was working on. A horse, she had said, though she had added a crown, so it might have become a unicorn by now, he had promised. Owen had learned the piano from his father. Not professionally. His father, a millwright from Cape Breton, had played at the kitchen table, which made no architectural sense, but that was where the piano had always been in that house. Owen had learned by sitting beside him for years and then, eventually, by trying himself. He never played in public. He played at home, at Phoebe's bedtime sometimes, on the old upright he kept in their apartment living room, that the neighbors had complained about exactly once and then stopped. He did not know there was a piano in the hall until a little past 7, when he carried a tray of empty glasses through and stopped at the doorway. The cloth was there, but he could see the shape of it, and he could see the candles. He set the tray down on a side table and stood there a moment longer than he should have. Evelyn found him there. She was circling the room the way hosts do when they are not fully present in the conversation they are having. Nodding, smiling, already moving. She saw a man in catering white standing at the edge of the cloth, not touching it, just looking at it. Something about the way he stood made her stop. Staff aren't meant to linger in the hall, she said. She said it the way people say things that are true. So Owen looked up. I know. I'm sorry. I'll move. Do you play? He paused. Why do you ask? Evelyn looked at him for a moment. She was not accustomed to being answered with a question. Because you're standing in front of a piano the way someone stands in front of a piano. He considered this. A little, he said. Evelyn's coordinator appeared at her elbow then, and she turned away to speak to him in low, clipped tones about the seating adjustment for the donors' table. When she looked back, the catering man was Cott, 67, who started it. Raymond collected vintage instruments the way some men collected grievances, with dedication, without apparent joy, and with strong opinions about other people's deficiencies. He had been drinking the Riesling and was now positioned near the piano with 2 board members and a journalist, and he had begun the kind of talking that happens when someone with a large opinion finds himself in a room that has temporarily run out of obstacles. The Whitmore piano, Raymond said, settling his glass. Bechstein, 1938. Thomas played it for 40 years. And now it sits under a sheet because no one in this province apparently knows how to do anything. He looked around. I'm told the restorer didn't show. He had car trouble, said one of the board members. Car trouble. Raymond seemed to find the phrase philosophically weak. You know what that piano needs? Someone who knows the instrument. Not a technician with a clipboard. Someone who actually plays. He looked around the room again with the specific expression of a man who is about to be disappointed by it. Evelyn had drifted back within earshot. She heard Raymond's tone and recognized it. She had heard it at every gala for 15 years. If anyone here can restore that piano to playing condition tonight, she said, and her voice carried the particular lightness of someone not entirely sure why they are speaking, I'll write a $10,000 check to their charity of choice. The room caught it the way rooms catch things. A beat of silence, a turn of heads. Raymond raised his eyebrows. Bold offer for a room full of patrons rather than mechanics. Someone laughed. Someone else murmured something about the impracticality of piano restoration at a gala. The coordinator looked at Evelyn with an expression that asked several questions simultaneously. Evelyn held the room's attention a moment longer than felt comfortable. Then she turned back toward the drinks table. Owen heard it from the corridor. He had come back to retrieve the tray he'd left. He was close enough to the doorway that the sound carried. Evelyn's voice, the silence after, the laughter that followed. He stood with the tray in his hands. 10,000 to a charity. He thought about Phoebe's school, which had lost its music program last spring due to the funding cuts. He thought about the letter the principal had sent home in March about the equipment budget. He thought about how he had read that letter sitting at the kitchen table after Phoebe was in bed, and how he had set it down and not said anything because there was nothing to say. He thought about his father's kitchen. He set the tray back down. He approached Evelyn, near the drinks table. He waited until the man she was speaking with moved on, and then he stood where the man had been, and he waited again, which was the only polite thing to do. Evelyn looked at him. The offer you made, Owen said, the piano. She studied him. You're the catering staff. I'm the fill-in catering staff, technically. Through Pemberton Agency, that distinction is noted. She tilted her head. You said you play a little. I play more than a little. But that's not the issue. The issue is what's wrong with it. You haven't touched it. I could see from the doorway. The mechanism under the right side of the lid. It's sitting wrong. And the way the cloth is draped, something's touching the keys. If it's been like that for a while, you may have a hammer shank problem. Could also be the damper felts, if there was a humidity issue over the winter. He paused. What did the previous 2 repair attempts find? Evelyn looked at him the way people look at someone who has just said something in a language they did not expect. I can look at it, Owen said. I'm not a certified restorer, but I know this type of piano. My father had one. Not a Bechstein, but close enough. You want to open it in the middle of my gala. I want to look at it. If it's too far gone, I'll tell you and step back. If it's not, I'll try. And if you make it worse?" Owen was quiet a moment. "I won't make it worse. I'll be honest with you before I touch anything." Evelyn watched him. Around them, the gala moved at its usual speed. Raymond was now holding court near the Lauren Harris sketch, saying something emphatic. The candles above the piano threw the same light they had thrown for an hour. "One condition," she said. He waited. "If you open that piano, and don't know what you're doing, you stop immediately. No heroics, understood, and the 10,000 goes to a registered charity. No cash, no exceptions." "Phoebe Ross Community School," he said, "in Dartmouth. They lost their music program in March." Something shifted in Evelyn's face. "Not much. Enough." "All right," she said. "Try." The room noticed. These things have a current, and this one ran from the coordinator, who mentioned it to the journalist, near the Colville watercolor, and from there to Raymond Alcott, who turned from the Harris sketch, with his Riesling, and a fresh opinion already forming. By the time Owen had removed the cloth from the piano, and folded it carefully over the bench, roughly 30 people had arranged themselves in a loose half-circle, at a polite distance, the way well-dressed people arrange themselves around something they are not sure about. Owen did not acknowledge them. He raised the lid of the Bechstein slowly, and set the prop. The interior was in better condition than it might have been. Evelyn's first instinct to keep it covered had probably helped. He examined the hammers on the right side without touching them yet, using the light from the candelabra, and then the flashlight on his phone. He pressed 2 keys with one finger, slowly, just to feel the resistance. He bent forward, and listened to the mechanism more than the note. "Is he actually doing something?" Raymond said, to no one in particular, "or performing the appearance of doing something." A woman nearby shushed him. Owen reached into his left trouser pocket and produced a small folding tool, the kind that looks like a pocket knife but is not. He kept it from habit. It had been his father's. He began with the 3 hammers on the right side that were sitting at the wrong angle, reset them slowly by feel and by tapping each key afterward and listening. He did not rush. The room was quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real is happening. Even Raymond had stopped talking. The damper felts were compressed but not ruined. There was one broken pin on the left side, a small failure, the kind that accumulates silently. He could not fix the pin. He did not have the parts, but he could compensate for it in the tuning, and leave a note about it for a proper restorer. He had played this piano's equivalent for 30 years. He knew what it was supposed to feel like. At 8:20, he sat down on the bench. The hall was as quiet as it had been all evening. He played the first 4 bars of something his father had always played on Sunday mornings, and the sound that came out of that piano was not perfect, and it was not what the Bechstein had sounded like in 1938, and it carried the particular warmth of a thing that has been silent for too long, and is finding its voice again. The candles wavered. The paintings on the wall looked down. He kept playing. Evelyn stood at the edge of the half-circle and did not trust herself to move. She had not expected it to sound like that. She had expected an approximation. Something functional. Something that would satisfy the technical requirement of the evening. She had not expected it to sound like Sunday mornings. Her father had always played before breakfast, before anyone else was awake, and she would come downstairs and sit on the bottom step in her pajamas, and listen through the door. She had never told him she did that. She had not thought about it in 4 years. She pressed 2 fingers against her mouth. The journalist to her left had stopped writing. Raymond Alcott, to her right, set his Riesling down on the nearest surface, without looking at it, which was the closest he came, in that moment, to being honest. Owen played for 11 minutes. He stopped not because he ran out of things to play, but because he could feel the room at the point where it needed to breathe. He had played enough times for Phoebe at bedtime to know when to stop. He stood from the bench. He turned around. The applause was not the polished, measured kind that happens at these events, it was the other kind. Evelyn walked toward him. She was not entirely sure what she was going to say. She got close enough that she was speaking to him, and not the room. "You said a little want to seem presumptuous." She almost laughed. It was a small sound, barely there. "The school in Dartmouth, Phoebe Ross, I know it." She paused. "I'll call the principal on Monday. The offer was 10,000. I know what the offer was." She held his gaze. "This is different." Owen looked at her for a moment. He understood something about what she was offering, and he understood something about what she was not saying. And he was the kind of man who knew the difference between the two. "Thank you," he said. He meant it simply. He replaced the cloth over the keys, not the lid, just the keys, and set the folding tool back in his pocket. He picked up his tray. "You're leaving," Evelyn said. It was not quite a question. "I have to be home before 9. My daughter's waiting." She nodded slowly. He walked back through the doorway. Around the hall, the guests returned gradually to their conversations. Though several of them looked at the piano as they did, the way people look at something they will not forget they saw. On the drive back to Dartmouth, Owen called his sister to say he was on his way. "How was it?" she asked. "Fine," he said. "Long," he paused. "Is she still up?" "She's been up since 8:30. She says the horse became something else. She told me it might." He drove the rest of the way through the dark along the highway that runs beside the harbor. The lights of the bridge were out on the water. He thought about his father's kitchen. He thought about the way the piano had sounded when it finally caught, not perfect but real, like something that had been waiting. He parked. He took the stairs 2 at a time. When he opened his sister's door, Phoebe looked up from the floor with the coloring book in her lap, her hair loose around her shoulders, and held up the drawing so he could see it. It was not a horse anymore. It was not quite a unicorn either. It was something she had made up herself, with wings and 4 legs, and a small figure riding on its back that she said was him. He sat down on the floor beside her, without taking his coat off. She climbed into his lap and showed him every color she had used. He held her, and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say. Outside the window, Halifax was doing what it always does in late November, turning cold, going dark, going on, and in a hall in Dartmouth, a Bechstein piano sat with its keys, uncovered for the first time in 4 years, still warm from someone who had remembered how to listen to it.